Hello, everybody. Hope you are doing well and ready to get started. Today, we are going to talk about how to build SSO solution on top of Amazon Cognito. Some of you already know me, but before we start, let me do a quick self-introduction. My name is Sergey Kovalev. It's not a surprise I work at Sphere Partners as solution architect. I'm a language agnostic engineer within 15 plus years of production experience in different domains, worked with startups, small, middle, big, and enterprise companies, and played various roles. So hold on, this talk is not about me. We are here to talk about some geek stuff. Single sign-on, what is it all about? Single sign-on in the enterprise refers to the ability for employees to log in just one time with one set of credentials to get access to all corporate apps, websites, and data for which they have permissions. SSO solves key problems for the business by providing greater security and compliance, improved usability and employee satisfaction, lower IT costs. So the proliferation of cloud apps and services in the enterprise, often in addition to on-prem ones, has created a significant fragmentation problem. Fragmentation in the enterprise is a challenge for IT and users. IT must manage the many apps in the enterprise, as well as deal with the shadow IT. Employees have to use more and more apps each day just to complete their work, which means logging into and switching between multiple apps and websites. SSO helps to solve the enterprise fragmentation problem. So what are the benefits of SSO? Usernames and passwords are the main target of cyber criminals. Every time a user logs into a new application, it's an opportunity for hackers. SSO reduces the number of attack surfaces because user only log in once each day and only use one set of credentials. So SSO helps with regulatory compliance. When SSO is a part of identity and access management solution, like IAM, it utilizes a central directory that controls user access to resources at a more granular level. This allows organizations to comply with regulations that require provisioning users with appropriate permissions. Systems enable SSO with a role-based access control known as airbag and security policies. This type of SSO solution also deprovisions users quickly or even automatically. Another common compliance requirement means to ensure that the former employee, partners, or others can't access sensitive data. So how SSO improves usability for employees? SSO solutions that are part of an identity and access management system usually have an app portal. To use an app, employees select it from the portal. If the user doesn't have an app, he or she can request it through the portal and it's added with SSO enabled. It all happens quickly, so users who might be discouraged from requesting or using apps are more likely to use them. How SSO lowers IT costs? SSO, that is a part of a unified access management system, takes advantage of the central directory to provision and deprovision users, making the process faster and cheaper. Policies can be defined based on user role, location, and other user traits. And employees, partners, and customers can be quickly provisioned across multiple applications in one action, rather than having to separately provision each application. Similarly, IT saves time on deprovisioning, which can be done in minutes instead of hours. So I believe that's enough for why SSO is so important in enterprise. You can read about that boring stuff on your own. And we will get closer to the topic. What is Amazon Cognito? Amazon Cognito lets you easily add user sign up and authentication to your mobile and web apps. Amazon Cognito also enables you to authenticate users through the an external identity provider and provides temporary security credentials to access your app's backend resources in AWS or any service behind Amazon API gateway. Amazon Cognito works with external identity providers that support SAML or OpenID Connect, social identity providers such as Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, and you can also integrate your own identity provider via SAML protocol. The two main components of Amazon Cognito on the left and on the right are user pools and identity pools. User pools are user directories that provide sign-in options for your web and mobile app users. Identity pools provide AWS credentials to grant your users access to other AWS services. So let's get into it a bit deeper. A user pool is a user directory in Amazon Cognito. Your app users can sign in either directly through a user pool or federate through a third-party identity provider is known as IDP. The user pool manages the overhead of handling the tokens that are returned from social sign-ins through Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple, and from any OpenID Connect, or OIDC, and SAML ADPs. Whether your users sign in directly or through a third party, all members of the user pool have a directory profile that you can access through an SDK. With an identity pool on the right, your users can obtain temporary AWS credentials to access AWS services such as Amazon S3 and DynamoDB and whatever. Identity pools support anonymous guest users as well as the federation through third-party IDPs. You always can reach to Amazon Cognito documentation on AWS documentation portal to get deeper into details. So we are going to briefly go through common Cognito scenarios. So no worries, just 6 scenarios. So the first one is authenticating with a user pool. You can enable your users to authenticate with a user pool. Your app users can sign in either directly or through a user pool via federated through a third-party identity provider. The user pool manages the overhead of handling the tokens that are returned from social sign-in through Facebook, Google, Amazon, and others OpenID Connect and SAML compatible providers. After a successful authentication, your web or mobile app will receive user pool tokens from Amazon Cognito. You can use those tokens to retrieve AWS credentials that allow your app to access other AWS services. Or you might choose to use them to control access to your server-side resources or to the Amazon API gateway. The second scenario is about accessing your server-side resources with a user pool. After successful user pool sign-in, your web or mobile app will receive user pool tokens from Amazon Cognito. You can use those tokens to control access to your server-side resources. You can also create user pool groups to manage permissions and to represent different types of users. Once you configure a domain for your user pool, Amazon Cognito provisions a hosted web UI that allows you to add sign up and sign in pages to your app. Using these OAuth 2.0 foundation, you can create your own resource service to enable your users to access protected resources. If you're interested in more detailed information about any of those scenarios, you can always go to AWS documentations as always. So the third one is accessing resources with the API gateway and Lambda with a user pool. You can enable your users to access your API through API Gateway. API Gateway validates the tokens from a successful user pool authentication and use them to grant your users access to resources, including Lambda functions or your own API. You can use groups in a user pool to control permissions with API Gateway by mapping group membership to IAM roles. The groups that a user is a member of are included in the ID token provided by a user pool when your app user sign-ins. So basically that's it here. You also can submit your user pool tokens with a request to API Gateway for verification by Amazon Cognito Authorizer Lambda function. The next one is accessing AWS services with a user pool and identity pool. After successful user pool authentication, your app will receive user pool tokens from Amazon Cognito. You can exchange them for temporary access to other AWS services with an identity pool. That's all about it. The fifth is authenticating with a third party and access AWS services with an identity pool. You can enable your users access to AWS services through an identity pool. An identity pool requires an IDP token from a user that's authenticated by third-party identity provider, or nothing if it's an anonymous guest. In exchange, the identity pool grants temporary AWS credentials that you can use to access other AWS services. The last one, but not least, is accessing AWS App Sync resources with Amazon Cognito. You can grant your users access to AWS App Sync resources with tokens from a successful Amazon Cognito authentication from a user pool or identity pool. So I know it's boring. You are waiting for some real-world examples. So let me show you an example of authentication flow for a back office or admin area, if you wish to call it, on top of microservice-based architecture. This flow is based on the very first scenario we went through. So let me remind you this one, where the user pools manages the overhead of handling the tokens that are returned from social sign-in through Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple, and from OpenID Connect IDC and SAML compatible IDPs. This flow is based on our own identity service, which is responsible for assigning roles and permissions for a user based on its identity and issuing our own GBT tokens to perform local authorization without any need of using expensive Amazon API gateway, where you pay per request. So let me go quickly through it. On the first step, user is directed to authenticate through any configured IDP, like Microsoft Azure, Active Directory, Salesforce, Facebook, Google, and so on and so forth. User goes from the standard authentication flow in SSO on the second step. You direct it to including multi-factor authentication step. It handles by SSO provider itself. And during successful flow, SSO IDP on the third step comes back with a SAML assertion or using OpenID protocol, depends on SSO itself, and provides user auth details and profile in a specific format. It may seem overcomplicated. Believe me or not, SAML protocol is tough enough, hard to understand and implement, but Cognito does all heavy lifting for us for free with built-in security measures. On the fourth step, the Cognito updates a profile. On the fifth, client receives Cognito GBT ID token, which can be used later to be authenticated through API Gateway if you would like to, but we go deeper. And on the 6th, we redirect the client to our own identity service with a temporary one-time code and state cookie to eliminate man-in-the-middle attacks. On the 7th, having one-time code and secrets from Amazon Cognito, we send a request to Amazon Cognito and get back ID token, validate it, and finally grant access to our microservice-based to the service in our microservice-based architecture based on their user roles and manage it internally or in some kind of different way. On the 8th step, user gets back with a GVT access token stored in, for example, secured cookie. And finally, on the last 9th step, can interact with our service while GVT access and refresh token are alive. So how to configure Amazon Cognito user pool? You click on the Manage User Pools button and go through user-friendly setup flow. So let me focus on some important parts of it related to the diagram we saw on the previous slide. So they ask you about the required attributes. In a typical case, we may want to allow only email addresses, enable case sensitivity, for username input, and pick only email addresses for required or mandatory attribute for our user in user pool, which will be automatically created or updated during user sign-in procedure. They can configure multi-factor authentication. It's not needed if it's a part of a flow for your SSO you're integrating with. Settings to recover a password only if you allow your users to directly sign up through Cognito, having their own set of credentials. However, it's not related to the last diagram I shared with you, but wanted to highlight. So here you can define a password policy settings, also not related to the diagram we saw. If you allow your users to be authenticated directly through Cognito using credentials, which is a prohibited way almost in any enterprise. You may set as many as needed app clients for the same Cognito instance. It can be dev setup with their own set of callback URLs and own pairs of secrets. On the screenshot, you may see that users will be able to use 2 different SSO identity providers, but not allowed to use user pool, so unable to enter credentials directly on Cognito. Here you can look up secrets, tokens, TTL, and enable needed auth flows. In our case, we need to enable SRP, Secure Remote Password Protocol-based authentication. So what if you need to add yet another SSO in a typical project? It may lead to a huge amount of work, isn't it? So what about Cognito? Configuration with ease. You go to federated identity provider and configuring it by following the step-by-step instructions. And yes, you can add multiple SAML-based providers there. Let me show you an example of mapping attributes for Google Identity Provider. Mail, name, given name, family name, sub as a username. So you've got it. Maybe a few hours of work to configure small or even trivial changes in your application to support yet another SSO, and you are done. Cool, interesting. How much does it cost? With Amazon Cognito, you pay only for what you use. There are no minimum fees and no upfront commitments. If you're using the Cognito identity to create a user pool, your pay is based on your monthly activity users, called as miles. A user is counted as a mile if within a calendar month there is an identity operation related to that user, such as sign up, sign in, token refresh, and password change. You are not charged for subsequent sessions or for inactive users within that calendar month. Separate charges apply for optional use of SMS messaging. If you use them, the user pool feature has a free tier of 50,000 miles each month. The Cognito identity free tier doesn't expire at the end of 12 months, and so forth. You can get more information on Amazon Cognito documentation. Federated identities and secure access control for AWS resources are always free, but a little hint, we are using a SAML or OIDC federation, like we saw in the example of back office authentication flow. The price for miles above the 50, not 50,000, will be approximately 3 times higher, but still not so big. But let's calculate. So when you propose a solution, you always should do approximate calculations on how much it does cost. For 1,000 monthly active users, it will cost approximately $14 per month. For 1 million monthly active users, it will cost approximately $15,000 per month. What does it mean? It's cheap if you use Cognito for back office, or in other words, for admin area, but it could be too expensive for you with quite different amount of users. Finally, if you are going to use some AWS services and do care about the price, always include approximate calculations in your proposal and think about use cases. However, AWS Cognito provides configuration with ease and has a built-in security features, no maintenance, and regular security audits. Is it worth to pay for? It's up to you and your client to decide. Thank you very much for your attention. Hope it was not so boring. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. It wasn't boring. It was
Thank you.
Thank you.
So feel free to reach me in Slack if you're interested in some details. I will be happy to explain some parts in my spare time.
Okay. Thanks a lot again.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone who joined.
Thank you.